Welcome to the Being in Medicine Show. I'm Corey Anderson.
And I'm Jeff Mars.
Together, we aim to revolutionize the healthcare experience for patients, clinicians, and all team members by unlocking the transformative power of human potential.
Each week, we explore with you and our guests how embracing our authentic selves and choosing who we are being can affect the nature of healing, leading to profound transformations in our lives and in the lives of those around us.
Join us today on a journey through self-discovery and empowerment as we unlock the human potential within each of us. Welcome to Being in Medicine. What a privilege today as we have Dr. Linda Sandel Pettit, who is a luminary in the realms of writing, speaking, and mentorship, whose work has touched countless lives. With over 5 decades of dedication to the written word, 4 decades in counseling psychology, and 2 decades as a spiritual mentor, Dr. Linda's journey is a testament to her unwavering commitment to personal and collective growth. Her acclaimed memoir, Leaning into Curves, Trusting the Wild, Intuitive Way of Love, serves as a beacon of inspiration, inviting readers to embrace the transformation power of love and intuition. Dr. Linda's presence is both quiet and compelling, embodying a unique blend of depth and strength. Her approach is rooted in profound listening, offering presence, compassion, and understanding to all who seek her guidance. Fearlessly exploring divine wisdom, deep feminine knowing, and intuition, she empowers her clients, readers, and audiences to connect with their innermost truths and live authenticity. With a doctorate in counseling psychology, a master's degree in counselor education, and a bachelor's degree in journalism, Dr. Linda's rich academic background complements her intuitive insights. She is a guiding light for those on a journey of self-discovery, encouraging them to trust in their own wild, intuitive way of being. Dr. Linda is not just a mentor, she is a catalyst for transformation, inspiring others to embrace their true selves with courage and grace. Well, welcome, Dr. Linda. Thanks for joining us today. What a bio.
I had the thought, gosh, I want to meet that person.
Well, we're here to meet you. We've known each other for a little while, but we're so happy to have you on the show and talking about your experience with being, specifically in your world of psychology and being a therapist for over 40 years, and how all of that has played into your experience of medicine. So welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I very much appreciate the invitation.
Yeah, absolutely. I know Jeff and I have been excited to talk with you, and we got the pleasure of speaking with your husband not too long ago, Dr. Bill Pettit.
Right.
So that was fantastic. Right. And so we've been looking forward to this conversation. And so, we're going to dive right into being, how that has played a role in being a psychologist for 40 years. What have you learned? What kind of mastery have you had around how being has impacted your practice? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I'm not sure what everyone means when they use the word being.
I love you brought that up.
So I want to tell you what it means to me.
Yeah.
And I've just had a really strong sense from the time I was very small that I was a spiritual being.
Yeah.
And that I had a divine nature. I think when I was much younger, I externalized that more, as a God outside of me. But by the time I was in my early 20s, that I was a manifestation of that energy had just become apparent to me. And so when I think of being, that's what I think of. Am I being that nature? So the more purely I'm being that nature, which I see as love, the more beautiful life is going to be, the more beautiful relationships I'm going to have, the more I'm going to accomplish, the more creative and productive I'm going to be, because I have the resources of a formless, unlimited, intelligence behind me, guiding me, informing me. And so that's what I think of when I think of being capital B,
Yeah.
capital BEING. How purely am I being that loving energy, that spiritual intelligence that I know I'm made of?
Yeah.
And I think that informed my work in psychology from very early on, although I couldn't find a lot in the literature on psychology that spoke about that.
Yeah.
And so I remember early on when I became a psychologist, sitting in my office one day, and I was with someone who was really struggling, and she bore all the manifestations of struggle in her person. You know, she was
Sure.
hunched over, she looked
Hmm.
older than her stated age, she looked terribly unhappy, she was very agitated, she was actually very manic at that moment. And I remember thinking, speak to the being inside of her,
Yeah.
see it and speak to it. And I had this sort of sense that I would often have when I was with people of like watching them transform before my eyes. Like
Hmm.
I could see what that energy would look like if it was streaming through her more fully, and see how she would brighten up and calm down and, just sink back into her natural resourcefulness. And there was something about that that was really helpful. It was helpful to see her, I guess you could say almost imaginally, in her natural being state, and to know that my being state was speaking to her being state.
Yeah.
And I would watch how that just shifted conversations. And I
Mhm.
didn't have a language for that until really a language to really understand that fully until I met Steve Hardison.
Yeah.
And we started having conversations about being, and he some of the language he used, like, I'm always looking for the gold in people, he would say. And
Right.
I'd say, yeah, I know what that means. That's what I'm looking for, listening for. That's how I'm showing up when I'm in that state of a kind of shared beingness with
Yeah.
people.
Right.
And I would just watch that I would become wiser and they would become wiser. And they would literally find the answers to the problems that they were trying to address in themselves and their lives. Uh, and it would just sort of surface naturally from a
Sure.
conversation that was rooted in a state of being.
Yeah. Yeah. So the way that you're showing up in those moments, opening yourself up, really opening your experience by who you are being, was resonating with their being.
Yeah.
Is that accurate? Yeah. And
It's somehow eliciting it.
yeah.
Yeah, there is I like that word resonance. There is a
Yeah.
spiritual resonance that happens. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I mean, obviously, after 40 years of work in the world of psychology, you've been with a lot of beings, right? Human beings in all those spaces, right? And
Yeah.
so, how would I know after you've kind of worked, you got to know Steve, you started to create the language around it, but your intuition around that was really remarkable to get that sense early on. How did you weave that into practice, or do you have other experiences where that really was you weaved that into your practice?
Well, I think it's sort of, in a way, there's been three stages to
Sure.
that. The first was going beyond my training and pointing to something you just said, trusting my intuitive sense. So when my
Yeah.
intuitive sense said, uh, speak to what this person would look like and be like
Yeah.
if love was pouring through them. That was just, an intuitive gift, an intuitive
Right.
grace. And then I found an understanding, which I think I was led to, called the three principles understanding, which speaks of how we're all creating our experience through three principles: mind, thought, and consciousness,
Yeah.
spiritual principles. And so those principles for me described how all of us are creating whatever level of consciousness or whatever level of being or state of being that we're in
Mhm.
any given moment. So that understanding for me was hugely pivotal and helped me have a greater language for what I had seen um, intuitively on my own, and gave me a language for sharing it more with other people. And I
Yeah.
watched miracles happen when I had that. And then I think when I met Steve, the piece that got clearer for me was how much we're creating from a state of being.
Yeah. Yeah. Always creating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that the right that the whatever creation we're in a moment is reflective of whatever our state of being or our state of consciousness is in a particular moment. And so I got more attentive to that,
Yeah.
just got more noticed that more in myself.
Yeah. How did you, was there times in your practice where you relayed that kind of language to your patients or to those colleagues that you were working with, where,
Oh, all the time.
yeah, how did that go? How did you do that?
Well, so if I go back to I always knew, just had a very deep sense that the answers that the people who were consulting me for therapy were looking for were spiritual answers.
Yeah.
I had a thought come to my head as a very new therapist. Linda, this is how it came. Linda, all psychological stress is spiritual distress in
Mm.
disguise. And I
Oh
was
yeah.
like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
does that mean? I wasn't sure,
Yeah.
but it felt right. And so at that time, I was a younger therapist. I look around for understandings that expressly bring the spiritual into psychotherapy. Well, there weren't very many.
Sure.
This was 40 years ago, right? There weren't very many. In fact, there were actually proscriptions against bringing spirituality into therapy because you were mixing religion
Right.
into therapy.
Sure.
So the closest thing I could find that helped me bring spirituality into psychotherapy was Jungian understandings.
Mm.
But I was working in Bible Belt Appalachia.
Yeah.
I was working in West Virginia.
Yep.
Most of my clients would have no clue who Carl Jung was, and if you talked about archetypes, they would have, their eyes would have crossed.
Sure.
What? But it at least helped me conceptualize in my own head, everyone is looking for God. Everyone is looking for spiritual peace. Everyone is looking to know their essence.
Yeah.
And I would just get really quiet, and I would have intuitive thoughts come to me about how to point people in a direction. And I achieved some success. I mean, it wasn't me. God achieved some success through me. I was a very popular therapist, and I could see
Yeah.
people were getting better. But then when I found the three principles understanding, that was incredible because I had a distinctly spiritual language that is completely a-religious.
Yeah.
And I could bring that into my conversations with my clients, whether they were fundamentalist Baptist, Baha'i, Buddhist, Jewish, Catholic, Protestant, it didn't matter. The language was spiritual, but it was not religious, had no prescriptions or dogma or rituals attached to it. And I started to watch people
Mm.
create states of being that were so much more loving, present, creative than they were in previously, that it was miraculous.
Yeah.
And they were responding to the language because I could show them and give them a lot of metaphors to show them how everything is created from thought,
Right.
the power of thought, the spiritual power of thought, and that innocently we all can create states of being that are not very functional for us, uh, because we don't even know we're doing it.
Yeah.
Like you said earlier, we're always creating, we don't know we're creating. And so that was huge. It gave me a beautiful language to share with anyone And I suddenly quantum leapt forward in seeing results in my therapy practice. Now, by the time and I can give you some examples of that, but by the time I met Steve Hardison and started to think more about how we create everything from a state of being, I was no longer doing therapy. I was mostly doing coaching with women clients who are intuitive creatives. But that they just expect that I'm going to bring that into the language. They're just
Yeah.
primed and ready for that. They don't want traditional models. They're really I distinguish. I don't know if this will help your listeners, but I distinguish for myself between religion, and Bill may have spoken about this, spirituality and spiritual consciousness.
Yeah.
And religion is just all the different religious faiths that we have that are based on beautiful dogma and rituals and prescribed beliefs,
Right.
and spirituality is very huge. It's
Yeah.
so many different ways that people conceive that we are connected to a power greater than ourselves.
Right.
But spiritual consciousness to me rests on seeing and understanding that we are creating everything through the power of thought without exception.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you for delineating those three things, because I think that's not only helpful for our listeners, helpful for me. So thank you for doing that. Jeff, what do you have to say about this area of being and psychology and so forth?
You already shared a lot of gold. I love how you described being with another person, seeing them, hearing them, being with them, as if all that is coming out of them is divine love. We all
Yeah.
get clouded by our human stories and our already always listenings
Right.
and that kind of stuff. But deep down beneath that is just that access to divine love, and how you call that forth in another. So that's really something to strive for a medical practitioner, I believe, is to connect with people at the divine level and call it forth. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Yeah. What would your recommendations, or what would your wisdom be to clinicians, practitioners, people who are in the healthcare world taking care of people, in terms of just intuition? How can they resonate or listen to or kind of dive into intuition?
Well, I think we're we're all we're all getting intuitive guidance 100% of the time without exception,
Yeah.
because that's the nature of the spiritual intelligence that we are manifestations of in the form.
Right.
So it's impossible. Like, I was trained in my psychological career that, only certain people have intuition, or certain people have it extra because of their personalities, or certain
Right.
people, or women have it more, those witches with
Now
the,
all those
their
things that we're told, right? The stories. Yeah.
But when I really saw that it wasn't special, that it's just literally programmed into the system of being human,
Yeah.
what I really saw was it's a matter of how conscious of it are you?
Sure.
Are
Yeah.
you just looking for it? Are you noticing it? So, like, I think about my my physician, for example. I love my doctor right now. She's just a wonderful, wonderful woman, and she she's not hesitant to sit, and she'll listen. She listens very well. She's probably
Yeah.
one of the best physicians I've had in terms of listening. Always seems unhurried, very present, even though she's got, I know she's got her half-hour window that she's got with me,
Yeah.
and then and the practice she's in is real clear. They don't have people in the waiting room. They just
Right.
keep moving everyone. But she won't she won't hesitate to say, "Let me just sit with that for a second.
Yeah. Wow.
Let me just sit with that for a second." And
Yeah.
then you can see it. She's checking in.
Right.
And it could be that she's checking into the logics of her decision trees, but I
Right.
always get the sense it's more than that. It's like, what might float up that I wouldn't even on my decision tree find there?
Right.
And then she'll come up with a question that really opens up my eyes to something I hadn't considered, or a symptom I'd forgotten to tell her about, or if I say to her, "You know what, Neely? I just have this intuitive sense that this needs to be looked into."
Yeah.
She absolutely has faith in that.
Right.
And so there's this feeling, the beauty is that there's this feeling that we're not in this alone as human intellects,
Yeah.
that we are both being informed by this beautiful guidance system, this wisdom. Wisdom doesn't point two people in a situation in opposite directions.
Right. Yeah.
It's not it's not capricious, right?
Yeah.
And so if something comes up in her or something comes up in me, it's kind of going wisdom is kind of going for the easiest portal or pathway in the moment.
Right. Bringing it
And
forward.
a lot of times it's really funny how something will occur to us both at the same time. But I think that rests on that we listen well to each other,
Yes.
that we have tremendous love and respect for each other, and that we trust this guidance system.
Yeah. That's powerful.
Yeah.
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 So, as a patient, that experience with your physician is very deep and meaningful, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, being as a patient in that particular moment, what does that do for you when you have such a connection? How does that feel for you as a patient in that experience?
Well, I feel very seen and I feel very safe,
Right.
very, very safe with her and trusting. I mean, I really trust that if there's something that needs to be checked out,
Yeah.
if there's something going on that I haven't quite become conscious of yet, it's going to surface in that it's in that conversation. It's going to surface. Either she's going to wonder about something or I'm going to wonder about something.
Yeah.
And so there's just a feeling of being held and being safe and really trusting that the timing is perfect. There's perfect divine order in terms of, my interactions with her and the management of my physical well-being.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
lovely experience.
That is a lovely experience. And, being in medicine, that is one of the things that we're capturing and wanting to show is that when we show up being who we are, being authentic, being love, being those things, it creates an amazing experience that is rooted in deep connection. And there's a lot of healing that goes on in that space. And so thank you for sharing that. I want to acknowledge you and your physician for creating that with each other, because that's what
Yeah,
it's about, right? And
yeah.
so let's lean into a little bit of your past, so to speak, and the memoir, Leaning into Curves, which is about this intuition and love. And share with us a little bit about that, about the book, and a little bit about what resonates in that book, and what wisdom do you have in that book that people can go and read and gather and take with them?
Well, it really is. It was a story that I kind of had to get off my chest in a way,
Yeah,
uh, in the sense that I just woke up to this intuitive guidance system in a really conscious way, and I can point to the date it happened. It was in my early 20s, and and I really learned to trust it,
sure.
and I really learned to trust it in situations where it seemed to be guiding me against conventional wisdom.
Yeah.
I mean, without going into a lot of depth in the story, the book begins with my meeting my first husband, who was the day I met him was a Roman Catholic priest, 40 years older than I was, on his way into alcoholism treatment.
Wow.
So
What a
unlike
way to start a book. That gets people captured.
unlikely match for a
Yeah,
23-year-old woman, right?
right.
I think I was 23 at the time, to meet this man who's 43, has been in the Philippines as a missionary for over 20 years, and is only in the States momentarily to go to a treatment facility because he started drinking too much alcohol in the jungles. And yet that night I go home and I write in a journal, I've just met the man I'm going to marry.
Wow. Yeah,
And it wasn't jocular or like, a kiddish thing. It was, oh my God, I have just met the man I'm going to marry.
right.
This man is the love of my life. And I remember thinking, that can't be. He's an alcoholic. I don't want to have anything to do with alcoholism. Know how hurtful that can be. 2, he's 20 years older than I am. Wasn't exactly the guy I had figured would enter my life as a soulmate. And 3, he's a priest. And I'm a very staunch conservative Catholic woman. There's no way I'm
Yeah,
going to get into that kind of thing. But I just knew I didn't have to worry about it, that I just had to sit with it and let it be. And if it was meant to be, it would just unfold. And I just knew that there was something, that a portal, the way I describe it is like a portal opened up and the spiritual eyes of love flew wide open.
mm,
And all I saw was potential and possibility.
yeah,
And I thought, if we're meant to create this, we will. If either one of us decides we don't want to create it, that's cool. And long story short, it did evolve into a very long-term marriage, and we had a child and a beautiful life together. And then he died suddenly in an automobile accident in 1999. And then I subsequently met another man
yeah,
who I had the same sort of experience of spiritual eyes of love flying wide open, and I see with crystal clarity. But the first relationship asked me to step outside the starter kit I'd been handed about how you live as a person
yeah.
and who God is and what spiritual intelligence is.
Wow.
What what that if you what it helped me see is that if you are in the beingness of love,
Hmm.
if you are in the beingness of love and you are keeping your heart and soul aligned with the beingness of love, you can trust that.
Yeah,
And sometimes it's going to take you in directions that require courage.
yeah. Yeah, I love the book in terms of embracing life's challenges with that openness and with the trust. And I
Yeah.
wanted to get to that. I wanted to get to that in our conversation because of leaning into curves, right? You were on motorcycles, riding a lot of
Yeah.
miles,
Yeah.
right? Remind me how many miles you put on the
200,000.
200,000 miles on a motorcycle, right? Leaning into the curves, right? And
Yeah.
so in medicine, we are often leaning into the curves, the challenges that we're faced with life and with, you know, healing patients and working with folks and with each other. And so that leaning into those challenges with openness and trust, being trust and being open will allow us to experience those things and navigate those things more intuitively, right? Would
Yeah.
you say?
Oh, I can imagine. I mean, can you give an example of how you see that? How
Yeah.
that works for you?
Well, when we are faced with patient care in a challenging situation where, when there's physical body death on the line and so forth, and we have to lean into that, and how do we show up doing that, right? And so who are we being, and how can we open ourselves up intuitively and just trust
Yeah.
our intuition in those moments to
Yeah.
say the right thing, to do the right thing, to um, be who we need to be in that moment by moment, I
Yeah.
guess. Does
Yeah.
that help clarify that, what I meant by
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. Oh, it's beautiful. Yeah, I absolutely know what you're talking about. Yeah.
And so I just appreciate you diving into that a little bit, because I think there's so much to learn from that space. So what do you say, Jeff? What do you got on your mind?
Yeah.
Yeah, leaning into the curves is a really good metaphor. The curves are actually part of the road, right?
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
necessary part of the road. We're in the middle of a surgery, and we start a surgery, and we anticipate with some degree of expectancy a final outcome. And things show
Yeah.
up along the way that were unanticipated, and we
Yeah.
can be resistant, frustrated, or we can just be with what's right in front of us. It's always only plan A. We went into the case with a plan A. Now something shifted. Now we have a new plan A with what's right in front of us. So yeah,
Yeah.
leaning into what's right in front of us, being with that curve will carry us onto that final
Yeah.
destination.
And no matter what level of healthcare you're at, whether, there's curves in front of us at every moment in any situation. And it's who we are being when we're presented with them that have an
Yeah.
impact on those around us. And so I think that's important to just recognize and be aware of, right?
It's
Yeah.
such a beautiful conversation because as I was thinking, Jeff, as you were saying that I'd want to be a patient on your operating table. Knowing that my physicians, both of you, had that trust in the guidance system behind you that would navigate you through whatever came up is pretty powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you've had a 40-year career in psychology. And I know I've listened to you speak before about the moment as a young psychologist when you first brought spiritualness into your practice and what was going on for you. That was definitely a curve in your world, was it not?
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you take a few minutes and just share a little bit of that story again? Perhaps, the one I'm talking about with your patient
I
and
love that
Oh,
story. The
yeah,
overnight vigil, is that the one you're talking about?
yeah, yeah.
Love that story.
oh, yeah, that see, I'll try to make that one short. Um, so essentially, I was not yet a psychologist. I was in my final phase of training,
Oh, yes, that's right.
and my training director assigned me to a catatonic client. I was doing my rotation on a psychiatric unit. So for those of your viewers who might not know what catatonia is, it's essentially like being in a coma.
Right.
You if people move at all, it's very rigid, stereotypic kind of movement, can't feed themselves, don't appear to understand anything, don't speak, mute, don't seem to see. I mean, it's really fascinating. You move their limbs in a certain way, the limbs will generally hold in whatever direction you put them. So I'm like barely barely learning how to do therapy, period.
Right.
And my training director says, you've been assigned to this guy who's come in who's catatonic. And I said, well, Tom, how do you do therapy with a catatonic client? And he kind of looked and he said, you know what? You're a gifted clinician. You're going to figure it out. And I'm like, yeah, right. So, so first session, the orderlies bring the client in. Uh, Man who looks like he's about 80 years old. He's only about 40, actually. And he had made a very serious, very, very serious suicide attempt.
Hmm.
He literally was in a quarry. He jumped off of a crane with a belt around a fan belt, I guess, around his neck.
Wow.
And at the last minute, the fan belt broke.
Wow.
And so when he woke up, he told me his first thought was, oh my God, I couldn't even kill myself, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
And so he's been in the unit for some time, but hasn't come out of the catatonia. And catatonia can last a fair amount of time. So the orderlies bring him in, they sit him down, and I talk at him for an hour. I pick him up, he leaves, and I'm thinking, well, that went really well. So the second time he comes in, I'm kind of interspersing periods of just being quiet and but still trying to talk with someone who's not talking.
Yeah.
And then the third session, I'm sitting there and I'm just thinking again, how do you communicate with someone who is not capable of communicating? And it just, this thought blooms in my head. He is communicating, he's breathing.
Mm.
That's the only form of communication. So
Yeah.
I get close to him, I ask his permission, knowing he can't quite answer me, but I say, I want to get close to you so I can see how you're breathing. I just want to breathe with you because we can at least communicate that way. And I can share in, your experience of life by breathing with you. Well, he's breathing very slowly, and what I get aware of is I'm trying to pace his breathing and breathing with him, watching him very closely, that I am consumed by sadness.
Oh, wow.
And I mean a horrible, heavy, deep sadness where I can't move.
Right.
And
Wow.
I'm in this state where I'm feeling almost paralyzed and it's very uncomfortable. And I'm thinking, what is going on here? And then I think, oh, wait a minute. Somehow you are sharing
Mm.
his sadness. This is what he's feeling. This is why he can't move. This is the weight that's going on inside him. I start to cry.
Yeah.
It was so heavy, so incredibly heavy.
Mm.
And I just blurted this thing out because this is what flowed through my mind. I said, whatever his name was, I think I have given him the name Dale. I said, Dale, I can feel your sadness. I can feel how heavy it is. And I'm just going to ask if you would, if you can, that you hand it over to me and just allow yourself to be free of it for 24 hours.
Mm.
And I will carry it with you. Now, why I said this, I don't know. I
Right.
do know. It was
Yeah.
intuitively gifted.
Listen. Yes, it
I said,
was.
I'm going to carry it with me into the chapel tonight and I'm going to lay it at the feet of Jesus. Okay. Immediately the hair raises on the back of my neck. Okay, now, Linda, you have really done it. You have deliberately brought religion into a therapy session.
Yeah.
You're not supposed to do this. But I just continued. I'm laid at the feet of Jesus and I'm going to pray over it all night.
Wow.
And so nothing happens. The orderlies come, they take him back, and I'm left there going,
What did you
what
do?
have I done?
Yeah.
So I call my husband Jim at the time and I say, honey, I'm going to the chapel tonight and spending the night in the chapel. I did. Prayed for him and prayed over his burdens through the night. Um, the next morning I went on the unit. The charge nurse says, what did you do to Dale? I said, what do you mean? What did I do to Dale? I'm thinking he suicided, actually. That was my first thought. Oh my God.
Right.
And she said, he came back from your session, fell fast asleep in his bedroom, didn't even want his night meds for sleeping. And he woke up this morning and he walked to the day room. He's sitting in the day room waiting for you.
Wow. What an amazing.
And it was the sweetest thing because I walked up to him and I realized he didn't know me because he hadn't seen me before.
Right.
But I said to him, hi, Dale, it's Linda. And he said, I know because I know your voice. I
Yeah.
could hear you. I know your voice. And so we went back and sat down and he said, did you do it? Did you do it? And I said, yeah, if you mean, did I go to the chapel last night? Yeah, I did. I spent the night in the chapel and I prayed over your concerns. And he told me this beautiful story about how he'd been raised in a pit. And his mother was with him and the only book they had access to was the Bible.
Oh, yes. Hmm.
And she would read to him. We called it the Holy Book. She would read to him from the Holy Book. And so this was fascinating to me. He said to me, are you going to ask me all about my past? And I said, do you want me to? Because your chart is 3 inches thick. I know what's in there about your past. Do you want me to ask you about your past? He said, no. When I talk about my past, when I talk about all that, all I do is feel worse.
Yeah. The sadness.
I just feel sad. And
Yeah.
I said, "So what can I help you with? Because I gotta have a treatment plan here, Dale. It's part of the deal." And he
Right.
said, this was so sweet. He said, "I want you to, no," he said, I want me a set of teeth." He had no teeth.
Mm.
"I want you to help me learn to read, and I want my own copy of the holy book."
Oh man. Wow.
And I said, those we can do. Those
Yeah.
we can do." So got a dentist to make him some teeth, easily got him a really nice holy book from one of the churches, and he was so proud of it. It was a real special leather-bound version.
Yeah.
And then, got him a literacy tutor. Well, the literacy tutor happened to be a pastor,
Mm. Wow.
and they became very close.
Yes.
And so I'm doing a rotation in another county months later, like 6 to 8 months later, and I walk into the waiting room to get my patient, and there he is with his pastor with him.
Wow.
And
Dale
and
is
he's
there with his pastor. Yeah.
and he stands up and he says, "Linda, Dr. Linda." He didn't call me Dr. Linda. He goes, "Linda, can I read you something?" And he opened to Psalm 23
Mm.
and read, "The Lord is my shepherd." And it was beautiful. It was just really beautiful.
There's the hair on the
So,
back of my neck right there.
I know. Yeah.
but that was such an incredible story, that just being in a place, because I felt a lot of love for him, just
Yeah.
being in a place of love and being in a place of trusting the intuitive knowing coming through me.
Mhm.
uh, we engaged in this beautiful communicative dance where he got exactly what he needed
Yeah.
and wanted. And the kind of funny clicker to the story, I think I told it at that beingness conference, was I went to my training director and I was like sweating bullets because I thought, oh my gosh, I've got to fess up that I brought religion into psychotherapy. And Tom said to me, he said, "Well, I hear that this really miraculous thing happened on the unit. And so how did that happen?"
Yeah.
And I'm like, do I confess? I mean, this is really going on in my
Yeah.
head. Do I
Yeah.
confess or do I fake a story?
Right. Right.
And so I said, "Well, Tom, this is what happened." And I told him, and he had tears running down his cheeks. And he said, "I knew you'd figure something out."
Yeah.
Wow.
That is just
So
an
for
absolutely beautiful story.
we're here with Linda Pettit talking about being in medicine. So for our listeners, who are you being in that experience, and how did who you're being make a difference?
Yeah.
Well, I use beingness in my own way. My own understanding is that when I'm truly in a pure state of being,
Mhm.
I am divinity in motion.
Absolutely.
I am love in motion. So I think in that moment, it was whatever Linda Pettit is, the identity that Linda Pettit is, had stepped aside.
Yeah.
And all the fears and proscriptions and prescriptions related to that were not there. And so there was a purer channel for this to come through. And he felt it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
He felt it, and it called forth his divinity.
Yeah. Yeah. That's an amazing story. And that I'm so thankful for you to share that, because it just really is a beautiful demonstration of being, just that the openness and resonating with another person's being in such a way that creates healing for Dale, and healing, and then the journey that allowed you to go on in your own life and to learn from that and to resonate with that. It's just an amazing story. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you for opening the opportunity. I hadn't thought about that, as something to share.
Yeah. What would you share? What other wisdom would you like to share with our listeners around being?
Well, it's interesting that you asked that, because there's one story that comes to mind that's a much simpler story.
Yeah.
But it was kind of a funny story in that I had a client whose employer had referred to me. And she wasn't doing her job well, wasn't being as productive as they wanted her to be. She actually worked in a hospital in
Sure.
a healthcare role,
Yeah.
and was at risk of being fired because she just wasn't meeting their performance criteria.
Yeah.
And the hospital was concerned that part of what was going on was that she had attention deficit disorder. So there was just a whole host of things going on that would make it hard for her to, especially when she was stressed,
Sure.
to stay focused and concentrating and do what she needed. And I did all the relevant psychological stuff, testing, et cetera. And sure enough, she had it. And,
Yeah.
but she wasn't able to tolerate the medicines for it. So it was a matter of coming up with some sort of way for her to figure out how to do what she needed to do. And she depended on the job. I mean, she was raising a family. She was a
Yeah.
single mom. And I did my best. I was teaching her the 3 principles, trying to help her find a state of being that it was quiet and calm as possible,
Yeah.
so that she could do what she needed to do, knowing that the essence behind us does not suffer from attention deficit disorder
Right. Absolutely.
ever,
Right.
and that she had equal access to that as I do.
Right.
Well, nothing I was doing was working. Nothing I was doing was working. I think I had, it was managed care. I think I had 10 sessions, and I think I'd used 8. I was getting a little desperate, like,
Right.
and I'm sitting there, and I'm I'm thinking, God, I've only got a couple more sessions with her. How do I get through? And all of a sudden, I had this thought, you know what, Linda, you're too invested.
Ah,
You're
interesting.
too you're too invested. You've been trying to change her.
Right. Yeah. Trying to change who she is. Yes.
Yeah. And so then I thought, oh, that's really true. So we had I'd been trying to tell her that thought creates a movie,
Mm-hmm.
and that she was getting caught up in the movies in her head, and that sometimes they were comedies, sometimes they were tragedies, but she'd get so caught up in them in the spiritual theater of life, she'd forget that she was the observer, and
Right.
that she had this beautiful power of thought to create something different and something new.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting there having had this thought that I'm too invested, and I think, okay, take a deep breath, Linda, and look at her. And I look at her and I get aware that the sun is coming through the window and it's hitting her face in a way. She wasn't a woman that we would call a classic beauty, but there was something about the light on her face and something about sitting there that I thought, "Oh my God, she is such a beautiful person." Everything about her is just so delightful. And so I'm in this it's really kind of funny. I'm in
Yeah.
this sort of oceanic sort of space of, I love this woman.
Yeah.
I just love her. I'm so grateful I've had this time with her. And all of a sudden, this was the funny thing. All of a sudden, I get aware that she has somehow started talking about Quentin Tarantino movies. I truly don't know how she segued to that, because I'm
Yeah.
in this reverie, right? I'm
Yeah.
just loving her. I'm in the beingness of loving her. And
Right.
she starts talking about Quentin Tarantino movies. And I look at her and I call her Nancy. I said, Nancy, how can you stand those movies? They're so friggin' violent. I can't watch them. My husband watches them with his daughter, but when I've tried to watch them, I end up with nightmares all night.
Yeah.
She looks at me and she says, "Oh my God, Dr. Pettit, they're just movies." And then she
Bingo.
bingo, exactly,
That's
Jeff,
it.
stops,
Struck gold.
and
Yeah.
she goes, "Oh, that's what you've been trying to tell me. I create these movies and I forget they're movies. Why didn't you say that from the get-go?" That
Wow.
was such a beautiful, and that was it. She
Right.
was done. She was done. She
Yeah.
went back, performance problems over.
Wow.
Mm.
She would just remember, "Oh, yeah, I've gotten caught up in my movie."
Caught up in the
And we'll go back to, I just take a deep breath, and if I'm a little bit quieter in my head, something will flow through about how to get myself through the next moment.
yeah,
But I was so struck by that it took my getting into the beingness of love,
yeah,
and then she got into the beingness of wisdom,
yeah.
Mm.
Oh, that's great.
and the wisdom came through her in a really unique way that I could have not in a million years
Yeah,
have come up with. The metaphor came up from within her. And I really saw that when I got invested, as soon as I'm invested in someone seeing something, I'm trying to change them
yeah. Right,
rather than being in the beingness of
right.
appreciation and acceptance and honoring and allowing.
Yeah, giving them the space to be who they are and where they are. Uh,
Yeah.
but your being is the love and the acceptance of them in that space, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. What a brilliant story. What an amazing epiphany and experience that was.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
And I'm sure you've had those where you intellectually, it made no sense for me to try to work with her Tarantino thing
Yeah.
in a therapeutic way, but it just trusting it and going with the moment and the flow of it, the
Yeah.
insight was so perfect for her.
Yeah. Yeah. I know Jeff has had many of those experiences with patients where just being with them, right, Jeff?
Yeah, absolutely. If you heartfelt listening makes all the difference.
Yeah. Yeah, let's dive into listening briefly here. And what do you have to say about listening and how one can be present in those moments, especially in the world of psychology and in all medicine, really healthcare? What role did intent or your commitment to listening play, and how did you practice that or create awareness around that?
Well, I've always been interested in listening. In fact, my dissertation was on self-understanding and empathy development in seasoned psychotherapists. I was really curious
Wow.
about how do therapists over time become more empathic?
Yeah.
Mm.
And that was kind of an interesting it was a qualitative study, it was kind of an interesting experience, but, uh, in that time frame, so this was in the '90s, I pr probably was one of the world's leading experts in everything that had been written on empathy,
Wow.
because I'm pretty thorough at what I
Yeah.
do. Now and I was looking to really understand what I felt there was something about levels of listening, and I found one man who wrote something about something he called spiritual resonance.
Okay.
And that struck me. I thought that's beyond empathy as we define it. Yes, we have mirror neurons that if we're quiet, we can kind of get into the head space and the heart space, the soul space of another person and have affective and cognitive empathic understanding of where they are. But there's something beyond that.
Yeah.
And then when I found the three principles and started listening for that, what Steve calls the golden people, I would say so when I would do my intakes with my clients and I would go to summarize the session at the end, I would try to listen very deeply and I would say, I listened to the problems that you brought to me. I listened to what the challenges that you face. Here's what I heard. Here are the feelings that you're having. I'd wait until I got them to a place where they said, "Yes, you've got it. You've got me."
Yeah.
So I'd use all my listening skills to get to that point. And then I would say all my empathic, affective, deep listening skills. And then I would say, but now I also want to tell you about all that you told me about how love comes through you.
Oh,
Mm.
interesting. That's great.
And then I would tell them all the places in the conversation I'd had with them where I'd seen their love show up.
Wow.
They didn't even know
And
what they
they
were
would
telling you,
They
but you heard
didn't.
it.
No.
no, in fact, Jeff, the most common thing they would say was, "Oh, I told you that?"
Yeah.
And they would often cry,
Right.
and it was like such a reorientation, like, and I didn't even really have language to explain this at the time, not the way I do now. I'm not fully broken.
Hmm.
Yeah.
There's something in me that even in spite of the feeling that I have that I'm completely broken,
Right.
that is whole and that is still coming through. And I would think about that, and at the time I did think it is spiritual, whatever you want to call it. It's a
Yeah.
spiritual resonance because it's picking up on the when the purity of love comes through all of the thinking that we do that often creates a state of being that we're not proud of, right?
Yeah.
Hmm.
I mean, like people could say things like, "Oh, give you an example. I just got really mad at work and I told off a colleague, but then I went home and I took my dog out for a walk. My dog crawled up in my lap and snuggled up to me, and I'd say, "Wow.
Mm.
Wow, isn't that amazing that your love, your anger, your upset just disappeared. It just was gone.
Yeah.
And all that was there was this love, this beautiful love that you have for your pet.
Right.
I mean, how do you explain that? So at least like get the door open to questioning,
Right.
how is it that I can be in all these other states of being that I'm not so happy with or proud of, and yet
Yeah.
right alongside there in the gaps,
Right.
there are these beautiful, pure feelings of and experiences of being love in
Yeah.
motion.
Wow. Well, that,
And that would often trigger a different it's a different ball game.
yeah. Yeah. When you're looking from that, when you're being loved, when you're being with them and accepting them, and now your perception, what you're creating and looking for in them shifts, and
Yeah.
that you have a whole new experience of them. And then when you bring that back to them in the way you did, in the way that you used language to create that with them, that really opened the door for them to see that in themselves.
Yeah, they notice, they become conscious.
Yeah.
They become conscious of how prevalent love is in their life, because no matter how hard you try, you cannot disconnect from that.
Yeah.
And
I think
I have worked with people in prisons who've done horrible, horrible things.
Right.
I think what I'm learning from you is that there's a lot of ways of being.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's human creative ways of being, or Quentin Tarantino movies that create ways of being, and there's ways of being that are truly aligned with divine love,
Yeah.
wisdom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if I could ask one question, it would be of myself: who would I need to be to see the divine beauty, love, and wisdom in the person right in front of me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Linda, thank you for sharing all of this wisdom. There's so much gold, as we mentioned so many times throughout
I
this.
hope so.
Um, briefly, just share with us what you're up to now and where people can find you and communicate with you if you would like. Share a little bit about that.
Well, thank you for that opportunity, Corey. I have a website. It's Linda Sandel, Sandel Pettit.com, that is actually being transformed right now with some new offers. But I do individual coaching, and I have a group program for women, and do a lot of writing and book coaching for people who are writing books about spiritually tuned understandings. So if anyone wants to get in touch with me, or wants to just comment on this podcast or ask a question that came up on this podcast, the easiest thing to do is send me something through the contact form on my website. I answer every email that I get.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you for sharing with us and just wonderful stories. I love the way that you tell stories. You're brilliant at it. So thank you. I just want to acknowledge you for all of your shared wisdom and being open and really shifting and expanding my mind in so many ways today. And I just want to thank you for all the good work that you're doing. So thank you for being with us. And thanks for being on being in medicine. And I know it's definitely shifted for me, and I'm sure all of the listeners, it shifted something for them as well. So thank you, Linda, for being here today.
Thank you for being so welcoming and open and just loving. I just love the way the two of you are.
Well, thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. And we'll have you back because I'm pretty sure we could talk for many hours. Story time with Linda is what we're going to call it.
Absolutely. Sign me up.
All
Thanks,
right.
Linda. You're
Well,
amazing.
Both of you.
thank you all for
Right.
listening. And thank you again for Dr. Linda being here today and sharing her wisdom with us. Thank you again. Have a great day.
Thank you for joining us today on the Being in Medicine show, where each week we open the transformative power of connecting our physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual nature to how we show up in medicine.
If you find this conversation valuable, please like, comment, and subscribe. And if you or someone you know has a story to share, contact us at beinginmedicine.com. See you next time.